Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we'll be covering how to reduce the likelihood of hamstring strain injury in athletes who require high speed running in their sport. First, let's establish what a hamstring strain is. A hamstring strain is like any other muscle strain. The muscle fibers essentially experience some form of damage or tear as a result of excessive stress. And a muscle strain can be more or less severe depending on the level of damage. Some strains can be very minor and hardly noticeable, and function may be fully restored within a week. Whereas a complete hamstring rupture, meaning that the hamstring muscle or tendon has completely been torn through, requires surgery to reattach the muscle together. Hamstring strains are a fairly common injury in athletes who require high-speed running in their sport. Athletes involved in sports such as sprinting, soccer, Australian rules football, American football, rugby, basketball, etc. are at the highest risk of experiencing a hamstring strain. Generally, hamstring strains occur during the late swing phase of high-speed running. This is the time when the knee extends right before the foot contacts the ground. It is proposed that strains occur at this point as the lower leg swings forward at a very fast rate. While this is occurring, the hamstrings actively work to try and flex the knee in preparation for ground contact. So the hamstrings end up using huge eccentric forces, and if they are not robust enough to cope with this stress, the athlete can end up with a hamstring strain. While we can almost never fully prevent injuries from occurring in sport, there are certainly things we can do to reduce the likelihood and rate of injury occurring. There are some training interventions that can significantly reduce an athlete's risk of experiencing a hamstring strain. Let's now discuss what we can do to mitigate our risk. The first factor is management of training load. This is a given for all injuries and is another topic in itself. The first thing to understand is that all tissues in the human body have a limit, and if we are pushed too far, we will break down and some form of injury will occur. So training loads cannot be so high that we are unable to recover. However, we also need enough load over time to ensure that our tissues are prepared for the demands of the sport. The main goal with load management is to ensure that the athletes are getting enough load during their training to ensure robustness, but not so much that they sustain injury. The second strategy to reduce the risk of hamstring strains is exposing the athletes to high-speed running regularly. This seems counterintuitive, since high-speed running is the very exercise which tends to cause hamstring strains. However, if the athlete's hamstrings never experience the demands of operating at fast velocities during training, when they need to sprint in a competitive match, they will be at very high risk of injury. So if we get the athletes to reach high speeds regularly during training, focusing on quality technique, we can build the hamstring tissues up to tolerate the demands of sprinting. This can be implemented either through specific sprinting drills or during sport practice sessions. For example, the coach could get the athletes to perform a few high-speed sprints after a warm-up and immediately prior to the commencement of the practice session. Sprints should start off with shorter distances earlier in the preparation period and gradually increase the distances over time. This will mean that we start with slower speed and less stress on the hamstrings and progress into faster speeds and more stress on the hamstrings in order to allow the hamstrings to adapt. The third strategy that can assist in reducing the risk of hamstring strains is general pelvis and hip strengthening. The hamstring muscles attach to the bottom of the pelvis, meaning that our pelvis and hip positions impact the hamstring muscles. So if we are strong and stable in these areas, we are likely to maintain good positions during running. Furthermore, it is clearly evident that general strength training makes athletes robust to injury. This study showed that athletes who were well physically developed were better able to tolerate high workloads and had lower rates of injury. This type of strength training will likely already be performed in a sound strength training program and doesn't need to be specifically implemented if the athletes are already performing strength work. Exercises which strengthen both the anterior muscles above and below the hips and posterior muscles in this region should be used. Exercises such as stiff-legged deadlifts, squats, lunges, ab exercises, and lower back work will all help build the general strength capacity for the athlete. The last training method to implement for hamstring strain injury prevention is having the athletes perform specific eccentric hamstring strength training. Eccentric hamstring strength has been clearly demonstrated as being protective against injury. Most recently, this meta-analysis showed that hamstring strain injuries can be reduced by up to 51% when the Nordic hamstring exercise was implemented. The Nordic hamstring exercise is a perfect fit for this category of injury prevention. This is because it allows the athlete to perform the eccentric portion without being limited by the concentric portion. So the athlete can essentially load the hamstrings more than if a machine or barbell was used for hamstring strengthening. Another easy way to perform eccentric hamstring strength training is by using a standard hamstring curl machine. If a heavy weight is loaded on the machine, the athlete can use 2 legs to lift the weight in the concentric portion and a single leg for the eccentric portion. This way, the hamstring can use a heavier load for the eccentric portion than can be lifted concentrically. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.